The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report with Dom and Charles.
Charles, you have done the worst job I have ever seen of leaving the podcast. You're still here.
And I feel really guilty because lots of people emailed me after I announced that I was leaving to say, good luck, Godspeed. I hope you return one day. Oh, you're so successful and good looking. Oh, I love you so much. Ooh, I just love you, Charles. But then I've returned.
You who emailed yourself those emails must be extremely pleased. No, look, Charles, it was a sad moment. We hadn't planned it, really, for you to announce it on Friday. But we've done a terrible job.
But it's not my fault. It's Andrew and Chris's fault because they won't fucking do this podcast. They keep on getting better gigs.
Yeah. Or gigs, anyway.
Gigs, yeah.
But it is good news that you're here, Charles, as one of the main presenters.
Yeah, well,
because
exactly.
It's a good day. It's a good day to have an official position.
Right, okay. So, because, and this is the thing, I just actually needed to inform you of something, Dom, which is that everything I do henceforth and retrospectively is actually an official act, right? And so if I commit a crime, Dom, it's not because I'm a criminal. It's because it's just part of my role as the co-host of a successful Australian podcast, right? And so therefore I can't be held criminally responsible for anything that I do because it's not me doing it. It's the role that's making me do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so that, and just by, way of, I'm sure the listeners have no idea where I'm going with this, but just to give you the vibe of that is the thinking behind the Supreme Court in the US ruling that Trump is allowed to be a dictator, right?
It is quite amazing, isn't it, that the 6 Republican appointees, including 3 of them, I think, who Donald Trump personally appointed, have decided now that as Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote in a minority opinion with, I figure, the other 2 Liberals on the court, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. Charles, congratulations on becoming king of the podcast.
King of the podcast. But the interesting thing is I think it's very, everyone's concentrating on the 6 people who voted in favour of essentially creating a dictator.
Yeah.
Very few people are concentrating on what an idiotic decision it was for the 3 people who dissented, right? Because knowing that Trump was going to be a dictator and has the power to say, I don't know, assassinate dissenting Supreme Court justices completely legally, they still decided to dissent. Whereas I think the people who are on the fence, like, the John Roberts, who, is not a toady of Trump, very shrewdly, I thought, decided that the wind was blowing in the direction of, well, he's going to be a dictator anyway, whether I vote or not in favour of this. But I might as well vote in favour of it because I don't want to get a bit of, polonium in the underwear or, Novichok on my face type thing. You know what I mean?
Okay, Your Majesty. Yeah, I mean, that's one way to put it. The 3 of them were fools.
Idiots.
For resisting. And particularly because you've got to remember that this stuff is after the fact. Like any lawsuit, it's years after the event happened.
Yes.
So, even if it had gone the other way, Trump still would have killed them on day one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I see what you're saying. Is if they
he's going to be a dictator.
If they if they hadn't dissented, he still would have got rid of them.
Still would have got rid of them anyway. But he would have fired them, and it would have taken years to have the legislation or killed them or whatever he wanted to do. He would have purged them on day one. Charles, I think you've got it the wrong way around. I think this is an amazing victory. Everyone's been reporting it as Donald Trump.
Yes,
they're completely wrong, Charles. This is the only thing that will save Joe Biden.
Yes.
The Supreme Court, the 6 Republican judges have all decided that the president is effectively a king.
Yes.
Can do anything that they want.
Yes.
Justice Roberts
maybe complete a sentence in Biden's case.
Oh, you can't win a debate. That's true. The king can't win a debate. But
but he can decree that he won a debate.
He can. He can decree he won a debate.
And he can murder anyone who says otherwise.
He can murder Donald Trump. Joe Biden
I see.
has until January next year
to
kill Donald Trump,
to
kill the Supreme Court justices, any of them that he wants.
Yes, because this is a whole thing that's been a problem with American democracy for quite a while now, which is the whole reason it's got into this trouble is because there's no institutional renewal. The Supreme Court justices can just stay there until they die, right?
Yes.
So in some ways, coming up with this more, let's say, executive style of rule where you can just execute people is
what's called the executive
it's
branch,
an executive
Charles.
yeah it's an executive
execute
style
people.
yeah it's an execution style of rule. You can just we can now have proper young sprightly very scared Supreme Court justices because
Yes.
the renewal doesn't have to wait for the Senate to decide. It's just like bam, bam, bam.
One mistake,
Yeah.
and you're dead.
And
That's
if-
how it works in a real, a real country, Charles.
a forward-thinking
One
country.
step wrong and you're purged.
And the thing
Charles-
is, if any of the senators don't like, the Supreme Court justices that are proposed, the president can just kill the senators.
We don't need the Senate.
Yeah.
You don't need any of them. You just need one,
does.
and it will be a man, one man.
It does feel very much like one of those boring prequels in Star Wars. I feel
it does,
like
doesn't it?
we've already seen this play out.
You're right. It's exactly what happened. And you
Yes.
know what happened then, don't you? You remember
Well,
what happened.
they sold-
It was Jar
they
Jar
sold-
Binks, Charles. It was Jar Jar
Oh.
Binks who proposed emergency powers be given to Chancellor Valorum, who, as we know, was really Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord.
Yes, we
Jar
we
Jar
know.
Binks was to blame for all that.
Right.
This is the
So
the Jar Jar Binks decision.
In this scenario, who is Jar Jar Binks here? Is it sort of Rudy Giuliani?
I think it's somehow Mitch McConnell. I don't know. He's got a certain Jar Jar about it.
Yeah. He's certainly got the neckline of a Jar Jar Binks.
Yes, indeed, the jowls. But I'm just thinking, Charles, looking at this article in the New York Times, that they go back to Nixon. Did you watch that movie, that wonderful movie, Frost Nixon? Which
that was brilliant.
The interviews between David Frost and Richard Nixon.
I actually saw it live on the West End when it was first
Oh, wow.
premiered. Yeah,
Well done.
as you do.
Of course you did. You're the king.
Yeah.
Do you remember the crucial moment, the key moment in that whole thing where Frost, by virtue of being a brilliant interviewer, manages to get Nixon to say, when the president does it, that means it isn't illegal.
Yes.
And everyone in the audience goes, oh my
Yes.
goodness, he's deluded. This fool, he thinks he's above the law. Charles,
Yes.
that is now a Supreme Court decision.
Law of the land.
Nixon
Yes.
is right.
Yes.
So
So do you think now what's going to happen is every time somebody uses Watergate as a sort of shorthand, gate,
Yeah.
it means fully above board activity.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
So
right.
if there's a sort of scandal, how every time you have a scandal, like it could be if there's a scandal over a fence, it would be fence gate or something.
Yes.
That'll
Gate.
That'll mean a really above board decision that everyone
Nothing to see.
Nothing
here.
to
That's
see
what I'm
here,
saying.
yes. Which is why, actually, just to divert into Australian politics for a second, the NACC that the Labor government set up, right, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, right, which has done, I think, nothing at all, right, on any scandal at all. Certainly didn't do anything about robo-debt. I think they may have even sort of called the PwC thing a bit of a nothing burger and there wouldn't be any consequences. Anyway, that just shows how ahead of its time that institution is. Because everyone was going, oh, well, hang on, we've got to investigate corruption, we've got to do something about all these criminal acts that are being committed. And the NACC went, no. They had sort of had their heads up, they read the wind, and they went, no, the Supreme Court is going to get rid of corruption by making it legal, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. We could probably save some money, just shut it down.
That's right. And I think this means, is Albo the king or is Sam Mostyn the new Governor General, the Queen? I think the one who's above prosecution now?
Look, the Australian it is very different.
Sure.
But if you want to read the legal text, which obviously the Supreme Court justices don't, but you'd have to say that it's the Governor General who gets the power, surely, over life and death. Which actually I don't think is necessarily a bad scenario, frankly. Like, who would you prefer, Albo or Sam Mostyn?
Sam Mostyn's very successful,
Yeah.
which is neither of those things is true of Albo.
The Chaser Report. Less news, more often.
I'm just looking at more detail of the justice. You know how Donald Trump's been criticising the Biden administration, saying that Joe Biden is the one who's got got him prosecuted and it's lawfare and all this stuff. And he talks about the Biden investigation. Roberts also wrote that a president has absolutely every right to interfere with the Justice Department. Biden had this whole thing of, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is independent. He can't get involved in prosecutions. Roberts changed it and said that the president can discuss investigations and prosecutions. They can just have trials of whoever they want. So that the day that Trump gets in, not only can he just kill anyone in the street if it's an official act, but he can send the Justice Department after anyone he wants.
So you got to ask yourself, why, if you're a Supreme Court justice, job for life, not really beholden to anyone except for the people who buy you RVs each year and send you on massive holidays. But, so there's a couple of corrupt ones. But why did the other ones vote in favour of something that so obviously destroys their own power? Like, if the president has this much power, then the Supreme Court can't rule him in. The judiciary can't rule him in. In fact, he's now got power over the judicial sort of ways of the Justice Department. And Congress clearly can't rein him in because they can just be assassinated. Like, doesn't it sort of collapse the whole system?
It does.
So why would you do that if you were part of the system?
Well, this is the strange thing. He doesn't realise, because he's a white man, he's not worried about being outside the system and being...
Oh, yeah, because he's never faced a consequence.
He never faced a consequence. Whereas by contrast, I want to quote Justice Sotomayor here, who says, as a woman of colour, he's quite familiar with the notion of
consequence,
government rounding you up.
Yeah.
She said, under this... Because it's not just... They also found that kind of actions on the outer rim of a president's responsibility, so things that are not necessarily obviously part of what they're supposed to do, the onus is on the prosecution to prove that they're not part of the president's job. And Sotomayor says it's impossible to do that. So this is now King. She says, and I quote, nightmare scenarios, orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organises a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune, 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 immune. That's what she wrote. And Chief Justice Roberts replied by writing, that's fear-mongering on the basis of extreme hypotheticals, as though Trump hadn't organised a coup to stay in power last time.
on extreme non-hypotheticals, on extreme actual things that happened. But also, isn't the Supreme Court's whole job to make sure that the laws, if applied in the extreme, don't fuck up everything? Like,
it's supposed to be a check and a balance. This is the strange thing about it. This whole nature of American politics, which is frustrating at times, is that it's meant to... no one's meant to be able to do anything, right? The Congress stops the president doing anything. The president vetoes the Congress. The Supreme Court stops them all. That's all done. It's now a monarchy. It's an elected monarchy.
It's an elected monarchy, although I imagine that Trump will... Because I think Trump will change the Constitution. Like Putin style, he's going to make it so that he can get a third term, right? Like that's on the cards. So the question now becomes, how does Australia sort of very politely, without enraging any, assassins who happen to be president, how does Australia sort of quietly back out of the room going, let's just agree to disagree, and just sort of place a little bit more distance between itself and this sort of shit show of non-democracy? Like, if we're saying, we shouldn't fully engage with China or we should, keep our distance a little bit from China diplomatically because they're not a democracy, well, surely the same principle has to now apply to America.
You could go down that path, Charles, but it's a dangerous path. The more sensible path for Australia is to lean into this, because Donald Trump doesn't have much time for Australia. He likes dictators. He likes Putin. He likes Kim Jong-un. He likes Viktor Orban. He likes all these. We need to have a populist dictatorship.
Yes. We need Sam Mostyn to stand up and be our Viktor Orban or our Vladimir Putin.
Or stand down and be replaced by Clive Palmer.
Well, Ben Roberts-Smith, surely.
The only way we could possibly...
I think the powers of assassination should be given to Ben Roberts-Smith. Like, if you're going to give it to one person, like that's...
Yes.
Yeah.
Let the purges begin.
I feel like Clive Palmer would outsource all his powers of assassination to China or something. Like, don't you think?
Yeah. Or worse still, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. Like, I feel like
Ben Robert Smith. We need Ben Robert Smith heading up the judiciary.
Yep.
Rounding people up, taking names.
No.
Democracy's done, Charles.
No.
You don't need to worry about it anymore.
No. I've worked out somebody even better because he's already got experience being a dictator. Dictator Dan. And he's not even doing anything anymore.
No, he's got the time.
Draft Daniel Andrews.
Dictator Dan, Governor General and Prime Minister.
Yeah,
and President.
Yeah.
And President as well.
Yep.
We don't have a president yet, but probably Donald Trump would prefer it if we did.
And first day of his rule, anyone who goes out the 5 kilometre zone, murdered. As an official act, murdered.
By a death squad.
Yep.
Yeah. Victoria Police, they've always been trigger happy.
Yeah, they've always been trigger happy. It's perfect.
So on this day, democracy isn't the same as it was at the start of the week. But on the bright side, all we have to do is lean in, lock up everybody, and we'll have peace in our time under the rule of, dictator Dan Andrews and his one-man police force, Ben Robert Smith.
I love it.
Charles, I don't think we should keep doing this podcast.
Well, no, I'm thinking that, you've got to shift with the winds, Dom.
That's true.
I think this should become a sort of mouthpiece, like a Pravda.
Oh, the official state organ.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think just for our own safety, I think that might be a good shift in our. It's not so much satire as sort of like hearty support of our leadership.
It's not political satire. It's enthusiastic agreement.
Yeah.
And we won't point out the shortcomings.
No, oh God, no.
We'll point out the shortcomings of the critics of the government.
Well, yeah, exactly. Let's turn our sights on independent journalists.
Yes.
They're the real troublemakers.
They are. They are. Good. All right. Well, we've found a new direction. I'm glad you didn't go away, Charles.
Yeah.
Long live King Trump. And look, it's not going to be King Albo. I think that's pretty clear. But whoever runs Australia when this is all over, Dictator Dan, I've always admired your work.
Oh, yeah. He's great. Yep.
I'm going to go buy a North Face puffer jacket.
Our gear is from Road. We're part of the Iconoclast Network. I may be here tomorrow. I probably will be, realistically.
I think the borders are probably going to be closed. Viva la revolution!
See ya.